Almost every Thursday, I have dinner with my godchildren, and when I arrive, I make the walk down the driveway and to the back door, where I walk into the kitchen. And without fail, my best friend is either unloading groceries, preparing dinner, talking to her husband, or getting a snack together for the kids. And as soon as Matthew, who is 2, hears the door open, he runs from wherever he is in the house to investigate. The pitter-patter of his little shoes on the hardwood floors starts somewhere in the dining room and echoes throughout the house. As he turns the corner and then around the kitchen island, our eyes meet. And there he yells, "Allie!" and runs and jumps into my arms. This, of course, signals to his sister that I'm in the house, and she appears in the kitchen too, yelling my name, giving me a huge hug, and quickly inviting me to whatever she was doing right before I walked in. This happens every time. Thursdays are my favorite day of the week. This week in our gospel lesson, we hear Jesus' teaching on welcoming and hospitality. Jesus, in these few short lines, is challenging us to think more deeply about what it means to welcome one another. Whoever welcomes you welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Jesus wants to make sure we understand who we are welcoming when we welcome people into our lives, into our homes, and into our church. We are welcoming the one who sent Jesus. We are welcoming God. And in doing this, we will not lose our reward. We will discover the reward that comes from the deep hospitality found in God's welcome of us. Our ability and willingness to welcome, to extend hospitality is possible because of the welcome God offers to each of us. The place from which we are able to do this is from our own understanding, experience, and expression of the welcome that we are able to rest in God. Jesus is calling us to a compassionate welcome as an act of service to himself. What we hear from Jesus in this text is that our compassionate welcome is not relegated to big heroic acts. In fact, it can be offered anytime in the smallest of ways, whether to a prophet, a righteous person, or a little one in need of water. All are welcome. All are offered compassion. The simple, basic act towards one another are all that God asks of us. We must look around and see who is in need and then do something about it. Our Christian faith advocates a compassionate welcome that encourages us to trust and to be open, to share, to not manipulate others, and to live a way of life that is beyond personal gain. If we're honest, this is a hard list. Let's start with the first 3. To trust, be open, and share. We live in a culture that places our default to question others, to approach them with caution, to be suspect, to live closed off because we don't want to get hurt. And while we are taught to share when we are in grade school, we're never quite sure the person we're sharing with is being completely honest. Despite the culture and our default position towards others, I think we can all agree that we would like to live in such a way where we can trust and be open and share with others. We are also called to live in such a way as not to manipulate others and live without personal gain. People do all kinds of things, have all kinds of tools at their disposal to manipulate others. It's the famous he said, she said. It's hearing what you want to hear, bulldozing others, gaslighting, all for the sake of being on the right side of the situation. We see this play out in marriages, with kids, and our families, and in the workplace. Sometimes even with strangers. We believe we can help people and change them in ways that suit our needs and our preferences, despite what might actually be best for the person. What would it cost for us to live in such a way, to live a life that is beyond personal gain? Compassionate welcome finds us living in a paradox. On one hand, we have the desire for human relationship to be rooted in closeness and warmth, depth, and durability. And on the other end, standing in the way of achieving this is ourselves. Our pride, our ego, our self-doubt only perpetuates the ways we try to build relationships with our own self-interest in the way. So here we find ourselves at a crossroads. How do we fully live into the calling that Jesus has placed on our lives? How do we go about this compassionate welcome with all that is stacked against us? Here is the good news. We need God's embrace in our lives to live in this paradox and fulfill our faith and calling of living into compassionate welcome with one another and extending genuine hospitality. Compassionate welcome means approaching each other through God. We must start with God. We must start by first understanding the welcome that we have received in God. And once we're able to begin to understand the grace and love that is offered to us through God, then we have a starting place to begin to understand this compassion, this welcome that we are all called to by Jesus to offer to others. How do we get to a genuine relationship? By putting the grace-filled hospitality of God's love at the center of our lives, at the center of all our relationships. Does this mean that everyone we encounter is going to be open to this type of hospitality? Probably not. Does this mean that everyone can offer this type of hospitality? Probably not. There are many barriers that we all face to fully understand God's grace and love and to allow that love and grace to transform our hearts and minds. But that doesn't mean we get a pass. We're all called to this hard and important work of welcome, of compassion, of hospitality. God's hospitality teaches us that close, loving, enduring relationships are to be valued, along with distant, occasional, and painful ones too. I'm sure it's easier for all of us to name a painful one, but the lessons we find there are just as valuable. Love is not always met with love. Jesus is clear with his disciples that being his followers will be difficult at times, and they will suffer. Sometimes love is met with the crucifixion, yet we are called to love in the midst of hate, even when those times appear that hatred has won. Compassion grounds itself in the double paradox of love, where love can lead to tribulation, which then also leads us to greater love. We must remember that God's grace continues to act in and through the most hateful situations, and the crucifixion is followed by the resurrection. With compassionate welcome, Jesus calls us to put our love in jeopardy so that its blessing can multiply in our lives and in the lives of others. Here at St. Thomas, our vision is to be an inclusive and kind church that learns and serves together. And our mission to experience the love of God through worship, study, friendship, and compassion to encounter and transform our city. To be inclusive and kind, our vision is to be the type of people who are capable of offering this compassionate welcome that Jesus is calling us to here in the Gospel of Matthew. We are called to love even when it's not met with love. We are called to welcome even when our instinct is not to. We are called to be compassionate even when we have not been met with compassion. We are called to trust in God and the promises God has for us. We are to trust in Jesus when he calls us to countercultural living, and we're called to be open to people we haven't met before, to people who come here for the first time, or people who have been coming here for years, but they just go to that other service, the 8 o'clockers. We are called to share what we have with those who do not. This is compassionate welcome, rooted in that risky, jeopardy-type love that Jesus so freely offers and gives to us. This is God's vision for St. Thomas. Last week when I arrived at my godchildren's home for dinner, I realized it had been weeks since I had been over. Between summer travel and church events and just random engagements, it had been too long since we all had been last together on a Thursday. My entrance routine was the same. I walked in, the pitter-patter echoed throughout the house of Matthew's shoes on the hardwood floors, the eye contact, and then, Allie! And the love that filled the house in that moment was palpable, all of us overcome by his welcome of me, by his excitement and love. This day was different, though. I heard Elizabeth yelling from the living room, Allie, come here. So demanding at 4. And so Matthew and I go and find her on the couch with her milk and a snack watching a show. She pats the couch and offers me a spot right next to her and some of her rainbow goldfish. I ask her, what are we watching? And she says, it's a new show about horses. I snuggle in, and Matthew finds his way close up. And just like that, the three of us have what we need: a snack, each other, love, and compassion. May we find ourselves running towards the other with the pitter-patter of our hearts overflowing with compassionate welcome, because we know the love and grace of the one who has already welcomed us. Because we know when we welcome the one who sent them. We have welcomed God. May we, St. Thomas, strive for this compassionate welcome, this radical inclusivity. May this place be filled with overflowing love. Amen.